Tonight we open 3 ledgers written in the same quiet ink. The ledger of a mother who brewed tea that never cooled, the ledger of a widow who carried parcels to the river at dusk, and the ledger of a silent girl who walked down a country staircase with a candle in one hand and a razor in the other. Mary Ann Cotton, Amelia Dyer, Constance Case, 3 English women born within 12 years of one another, 3 black dresses that never came off, 3 names that still fall like frost across the tongue. Between them they took more than 400 lives, yet only one ever felt the rope. The others were granted silence, distance, and almost a century of breath. This is not a celebration of monsters, it is a requiem for the children who never woke, and for the women who, in the end, could not wake from what they had become. Close the door, lower the lights. We are going back into the Victorian night, where every nursery door was locked from the inside and every key turned twice. Mary Ann Robson entered the world on the 10/31 to 1832 in the mining hamlet of Low Moorsley near Hetton-le-Hole. She was baptized the next day, 11/01/1832, in the damp little church that served the Pitt families. Her father, Michael Robson, worked as a sinker, descending hundreds of feet to carve new shafts. Her mother, Margaret, kept house in a 2-room cottage that shook whenever the cages rose and fell. Money was always short. The children slept 3 to a bed, and the smell of damp coal dust never left their clothes. Mary Ann attended the village school only until she was about 9, then went into service as a nursemaid and later as a dressmaker's apprentice in nearby South Hetton. By 14 she could read and write, but the wages were small and the hours long. The family moved often, chasing whatever colliery paid best, and death walked close behind them. Her father fell down a shaft and was killed when she was still a girl. From that day forward, the Robsons learned that life could end in an instant, and that a widow's portion was almost nothing at all. At 20, on 07/28/1852, Mary Ann married William Mowbray, a colliery labourer in Newcastle. They moved south to Plymouth and then to Hendon near Sunderland, following the railway work. Children came quickly, Margaret Jane in 1853, Isabella in 1856, and others after. William earned steady wages for a time, but by 1865 the family was back in the northeast, living in small rented rooms. 4 of the children died in rapid succession between 1858 and 1865, each carried off by what the parish doctors wrote down as gastric fever. William himself fell ill in the autumn of 1865 and died within days. Mary Ann collected the insurance money and buried him quietly. She soon took work as a nurse in the Sunderland infirmary, where she met George Ward, a patient with consumption. They married in 1866. George lingered only a few months and was dead by 1866. A second insurance payment followed. In the spring of 1867, she was employed as housekeeper to James Robinson in Pallion, a widower with 5 young children. One of Robinson's infants died in her care, then another, and then his mother-in-law. Robinson nevertheless married her on 08/24/1867. 2 of their own children were born and died before their first birthdays. By 1870 the marriage had soured. Robinson discovered that money was disappearing and that his new wife had run up debts in his name. He turned her out of the house with nothing but the black dress on her back. Money was always short, and now there was none at all. In the autumn of 1870, Mary Ann drifted south to West Auckland, a grim little mining village near Bishop Auckland. She lodged with a widow named Margaret Cotton, whose brother Frederick had lately lost his wife and was left with 2 small boys. On 09/17/1871, Mary Ann married Frederick Cotton in St Andrew's Church, though her previous husband James Robinson was still alive. She told the parish clerk she was a widow, No one checked. Within months, Margaret Cotton herself was dead of stomach complaints. Frederick followed in 1872. His two boys, Frederick Jr. and Charles Edward, lingered a little longer. At the same time, Joseph Nattrass, an old lover from earlier years, moved into the house as a lodger. He too fell ill and died in the spring of 1872. The insurance policies were taken out, the premiums paid, the undertaker called. Neighbours noticed that whenever Mary Ann Cotton nursed the sick, they never recovered, yet the house was always clean, the mourning dress always fresh, and the widow always calm. She began speaking of moving again, perhaps to a larger town where a respectable woman might find better work. The children grew thin and quiet. On the morning of 07/12/1872, 7-year-old Charles Edward Cotton woke crying with pains in his stomach. Mary Ann gave him warm tea and a little milk. The boy grew worse through the day. By nightfall, he lay on the narrow bed in the back room of the cottage in Front Street, West Auckland, his breathing shallow and quick. The doctor was not sent for until late. When he arrived, the child was already slipping away. Charles Edward died shortly after midnight. Mary Ann stood at the foot of the bed in her black dress, hands folded, face still. The room was quiet except for the ticking of a cheap clock and the faint scrape of coal dust against the window pane. The parish clerk, Thomas Riley, called at the house on 07/13/1872 to ask about relief for the remaining child. Mary Ann told him the boy would soon be gone the same road as the rest, and that she intended to place him in the workhouse so she could move away and better herself. Riley, uneasy at the casual tone, refused to issue a burial order until a doctor examined the body. On 07/17/1872, Dr. Kilburn performed the post-mortem examination on Charles Edward Cotton in the front room of the cottage. He found unmistakable traces of arsenic in the stomach and intestines. Word spread quickly through West Auckland. That same evening, Police Superintendent Henderson arrived with a warrant. They found Mary Ann in the kitchen, calmly preparing tea. When told she was charged with the murder of Charles Edward Cotton by poisoning, she answered only, "I am innocent, and I'll prove it." She was taken by cab to Durham Jail on 07/18/1872. While the house was searched, neighbours gathered in the lane, watching in silence as bundles of flypapers and bottles marked poison were carried out. The trial opened at Durham Winter Assizes on 03/05/1873 before Mr. Justice Archibald. The courtroom was packed. People had come from every pit village to see the woman the newspapers now called the West Auckland Poisoner. The Crown, led by Mr. Campbell Foster, laid out a chain of deaths stretching back almost 20 years. 4 husbands, 11 children, 1 lover, 1 sister-in-law. Each had died of violent stomach pains after drinking tea or milk prepared by Mary Ann Cotton. Insurance policies were produced, premiums paid in her handwriting, death certificates signed by compliant doctors who had written gastric fever. Dr. Kilburn and other medical men testified that the amount of arsenic found in Charles Edward Cotton was enough to kill 5 grown men. The defence, conducted by Mr. Charles Russell, argued that the boy had stolen flypapers himself and that arsenic was common in every mining cottage for killing rats. They spoke of the misery of repeated widowhood, of a woman worn down by grief and want. Mary Ann took the stand on 03/06/1873. Dressed in black, her voice steady, she denied every charge. When asked why so many had died in her care, she replied simply, "I have been very unfortunate." On 03/07/1873, after 25 minutes, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on the single count of murdering Charles Edward Cotton. The judge placed the black cap upon his head and sentenced her to death. No recommendation to mercy was made. On the morning of 03/24/1873, the bells of Durham Cathedral tolled 8 times as the prison clock struck the hour. A small crowd gathered outside the jail walls in the usual jeering throng, thinned by the bitter wind and the knowledge that this was a woman they were to watch die. Inside the yard, the gallows had been erected overnight. Mary Ann Cotton walked out at 8 o'clock sharp, supported by 2 warders. She wore the same black dress she had worn throughout the trial, her hair still neatly pinned. When the chaplain asked if she had anything to say, she answered quietly, "No, sir, I have nothing to say." The rope was placed around her neck, the white hood drawn down, and the bolt pulled by William Calcraft. The drop was short, the rope and knot were old. She struggled for nearly 3 minutes before the movements ceased. The black flag rose above the prison wall at 08:08. The Northern Echo the next day called it a scene too painful for description. With her death, the whispers stopped, and the insurance offices quietly changed their rules. 21 graves were opened in the months that followed. In 15 of them, arsenic was found in quantities that left no room for doubt. After that, the record falls silent. Was Mary Ann Cotton a monster forged in the black dust of the pits, or simply a woman who discovered that poverty and a teaspoon of poison could buy another month of bread? Did the rope give justice, or merely silence a question the age could not bear to answer? And in quieter corners of the world today, when money is short and a child cries too long, does something of her shadow still linger? The woman we're talking about in our second story today is Amelia Dyer, and we're going to open the files of a nearly forgotten case, one that drifted through the late Victorian years like an unwanted gift. Amelia Elizabeth Hobley was baptised on 05/29/1837 in the parish church of St Philip and St Jacob, Bristol. She had been born a few weeks earlier in Pile Marsh, a tangle of courts and alleys pressed hard against the railway viaduct where the smoke from the engines settled like black snow. Her father, Samuel Hobley, had once been a master shoemaker with his own small shop in narrow Wine Street. Her mother, Sarah, took in washing when the customers grew scarce. 5 children shared 2 upstairs rooms that smelled perpetually of boiled cabbage, wet brick, and the sour steam of the dye works nearby. Money was always short. Samuel's lungs gave out in 1848 when Amelia was 11. The coffin was carried out past the children standing barefoot on the cold flags. Within a year, the family had scattered. Amelia went into service as a maid-of-all-work, then apprenticed herself to a corset maker, learning to cut and stitch by gaslight. Later, she trained as a monthly nurse under Ellen Dane, a registered midwife in Knowle. She was tall, strong-handed, calm in the lying-in room, and could read and write well enough to keep accounts. Patients remembered her steady grey eyes and the way she never flinched at blood. In 1861, at 24, she married George Thomas, a brewer's clerk from Redcliffe. They set up house in Bedminster, had a daughter, Mary Ann, known as Polly, and for a few years lived quietly on the edge of respectability. Then George died suddenly in 1869, leaving only a few pounds and a mountain of debts. Amelia stood at the graveside in black bombazine that would never afterward leave her back, holding the hand of a small girl who did not yet understand that everything had changed. After the funeral in 1869, Amelia moved with little Polly into 2 rooms in fish ponds on the edge of Bristol, sharing the house with her widowed mother Sarah, whose mind had begun to wander after a severe attack of typhus some years earlier. Sarah drank gin when she could get it, and the neighbours heard her singing old hymns at odd hours. Money was always short. Amelia took whatever lying-in cases she could find, sleeping on a straw mattress beside the labouring women, washing the blood from the sheets herself, because she could not afford a laundress. In 1872, she married William Dyer, a labourer from the docks, and bore him a daughter, Ellen, in 1873, and a son, William Samuel, in 1875. The marriage limped along. William Dyer drank heavily and the wages were unsteady. By 1876 they had separated. He vanished back into the port taverns and she never spoke his name again. She kept the children with her, moving from lodging to lodging in Totterdown and Bedminster, always one step ahead of the rent collector. Polly, now 12, was sent out to service as a nursemaid. Ellen and young William were left with whatever neighbour would take a few pence to mind them while Amelia attended confinements. It was during these years that she first began to take in unmarried mothers for their lying in, and when the babies were born, to offer to find good homes for a premium of £6 or £8. Some mothers paid weekly and collected their children later, pale and quiet but breathing. Others paid the lump sum and asked no more questions. Amelia kept careful ledgers in her neat copper plate hand, entering the date, the mother's initials, the amount received, and the date the child went to its new home. The line between nursing and farming the babies grew thinner with every entry. By 1879, the ledgers had grown thick and the rooms had grown quiet. In January of that year, a coroner's inquest in Bristol found that a 4-month-old boy entrusted to Amelia Dyer had died of starvation and neglect. The jury returned a verdict of willful murder, but the charge was reduced to neglect, and she was sentenced to 6 months' hard labour at Gloucester Prison. She emerged thinner, her grey hair now streaked with white, and resolved never again to register as a baby farmer. From that day forward, she worked in the shadows. She moved first to Cardiff in 1881, then to Oxford, then back to Bristol under different names: Mrs. Thomas, Mrs. Harding, Mrs. Stewart. Each time she placed fresh advertisements in local papers. Respectable married couple, no family, desire to adopt healthy infant, premium required. Letters poured in. Mothers arrived by third-class rail with carpet bags and tear-stained faces. Amelia met them at the door in her black dress and white widow's cap, speaking softly of country air and Christian homes. The children were taken upstairs. The mothers left lighter in heart and purse. In 1888, she settled in Reading, first at 45 Kensington Road, then at 26 Pigott's Road in Caversham. The river was close, and the trains ran frequently. The advertisements now appeared in the Reading Mercury and the Berkshire Chronicle. The fees rose to £10 and £12. She bought laudanum by the pint from multiple chemists: Mr. Blackburn in Caversham, Mr. Druitt in Oxford Road, Mr. Wheeler in Broad Street, always paying cash and never giving the same name twice. At night, the house was quiet except for the occasional muffled cry that stopped abruptly. Neighbours noticed parcels being carried out after dark, parcels wrapped in brown paper and tied with ordinary string. They noticed the smell of carbolic soap and something sweeter beneath it. They noticed that Amelia Dyer grew stouter, her cheeks redder, her hands heavier, yet she never seemed short of money. She pawned silver christening mugs and lace christening robes at 3 different shops, always on different days, always in different names. The pawn tickets were folded neatly in a tin box under her bed. By 1895, she had moved again to 76 Mayo Road, a narrow house with a strip of garden running down to the Kennet. The advertisements continued. The river continued to receive its parcels. Money was no longer short. It was simply never enough to still the restlessness that had settled in her bones. On the afternoon of 03:30, 1896, a barge hand named Charles Humphreys was poling his way through the sluggish water at Caversham Lock when the pole struck something soft beneath the surface. He hooked it up, a small carpet bag weighted with 2 house bricks. Inside lay the body of a baby girl, wrapped in brown paper and tied with ordinary string. The paper still carried the faint embossed heading of a stationer in Reading, and beneath it the penciled address, Mrs. Thomas, 26 Piggott's Road, Caversham. The child was Doris Marmon, 13 months old. A length of white edging tape had been drawn twice around the neck and knotted tightly. 2 days later, on 04/01/1896, the body of a boy, Harry Simmons, 15 months, drifted against the piles at Reading Bridge. The same tape, the same knot, the same careful parcel. The police now watched every house Amelia Dyer had ever occupied. On the evening of 04/03/1896, a young constable, Arthur Tollett, knocked at 76 Mayo Road, carrying a 4-month-old girl in his arms. He told Amelia he was a widower from London, that his wife had died in childbirth, and that he could pay £10 to have the infant properly cared for. Amelia took the child, weighed her in her heavy hands, counted the notes slowly, and promised to write. The door closed, the constable stepped back into the lane and signalled. At 8:30 the following morning, 04/04/1896, Inspector James Anderson and Sergeant Harry James returned with a warrant. Amelia Dyer opened the door herself, still in her black dress and bonnet, the same clothes she had worn the night before. The house was thick with the smell of carbolic, laudanum and wet brick. She looked at the paper, then at the officers, and said only, "You've got me now." The handcuffs closed without a struggle. The search of 76 Mayo Road began at once on 04/04/1896, a grey morning with the river fog still clinging to the streets. Inspector Anderson led the men through every room, their boots heavy on the creaking boards. In the parlour they found a table strewn with letters from mothers, some written in haste on cheap paper, others in careful schoolgirl script, all begging for news of children they had surrendered. A tin box under the bed held pawn tickets for silver christening mugs, lace robes and a dozen baby blankets, each ticket dated and signed with a different name. Drawers yielded rolls of white edging tape, the exact width and weave that had marked the necks of Doris Marmon and Harry Simmons. In the kitchen cupboard stood bottles of laudanum and Mother's Friend syrup, their labels faded, but the contents still dark and viscous. The garden was turned over, the privy drains opened, the river dragged for days. By 04/10/1896, 6 more bodies had risen to the surface between Caversham and London. 3 girls, 3 boys, all under 2 years, all wrapped in brown paper parcels tied with string and bearing the same careful hand. Dr. Maurice Thomas, the Home Office pathologist, conducted the inquests at Reading Town Hall. He noted the thinness of the limbs, the sunken eyes, the white tape marks around the throats, and the presence of laudanum in the stomachs. The official cause of death was recorded as strangulation, with laudanum as a contributing factor. The mothers came forward one by one. Mrs. Marmon from Cheltenham, Mrs. Simmons from Paddington, others from Bristol and Cardiff, each clutching a receipt or a letter promising a good home. They spoke of the £10 they had paid, the last they had seen of their children, the silence that followed. Neighbours from Piggott's Road and Kensington Road testified to the parcels carried out at dusk, the smell of smoke from the chimney, the way Amelia Dyer grew quieter as the years passed. On 04/10/1896, Amelia was committed for trial at Reading Magistrates' Court. The courtroom was packed. The air was heavy with the rustle of skirts and the murmur of voices. She sat erect, her hands folded, her face flushed but composed. When asked how many children had passed through her care, she replied in a low voice, "Too many to count." The magistrate ordered her held at Holloway Prison pending the Old Bailey session. The police continued their work, interviewing chemists who remembered her purchases, landladies who had turned her out for unpaid rent, and mothers who had wept when no letters came. The trial opened at the Old Bailey on 05/21/1896, before Mr. Justice Wills. The public galleries were full long before the doors opened. Women in black veils stood 3 deep along the rails, and the air was thick with the scent of camphor and wet wool. Amelia Dyer was brought up from the cells at 10 o'clock sharp. She had grown heavier in Holloway. Her black dress strained at the seams, her cheeks were red, her grey hair still pinned neatly beneath the same bonnet. She stood motionless while the indictment was read, that on or about 03/30/1896 she did feloniously, willfully, and of malice aforethought murder Doris Marmon. The Crown was led by Mr. Horace Avery and Mr. R.D. Muir. They called only the evidence needed for the single count, yet the tale it told was vast. Dr. Maurice Thomas described the tape marks twice around the neck and the laudanum in the stomach. Charles Humphreys, the barge hand, told how the parcel had come up from the water. Inspector Anderson produced the tin box of pawn tickets, the rolls of white tape, the bottles from the kitchen cupboard. Chemists from Caversham, Oxford Road and Broad Street identified Amelia Dyer as the woman who had bought laudanum by the pint under 6 names. Mothers took the stand one after another, Mrs. Evelina Marmon, Mrs. Jane Simmons, others whose names were withheld, and spoke in low voices of the £10 they had pressed into her hand, the promises of country air and Christian homes, the letters that never came. The jury listened in silence. Even the reporters set down their pencils. The defence, Mr. Kapadia and Mr. Lorry, offered almost nothing. They did not put Amelia in the witness box. They did not dispute the facts. They spoke instead of a woman worn down by 30 years of want, of a mind clouded by sleepless nights and the endless crying of children she could not feed. They asked the jury to consider whether the hand that tied the tape had known what it did, whether misery had overborne reason. The judge listened without expression. On 05/22/1896, after barely 25 minutes, the jury filed back in. The foreman stood and pronounced the single word, guilty. No recommendation to mercy was added. Mr. Justice Wills placed the black cap upon his head and sentenced her to death in the usual form. Amelia Dyer inclined her head once, then turned and walked down the steps to the cells without a sound. On the morning of 06/10/1896, the great bell of Newgate rang out at 8:30. A thin rain was falling on the Old Bailey yard, turning the flagstones black and slick. The execution shed had been built overnight. The beam was new, the rope tested, the drop measured to the inch. The official party assembled quietly. The High Sheriff of London, the Under Sheriff, the Governor of Newgate, the chaplain, James Billington, and his assistant. A handful of reporters stood in the corner, notebooks already damp. At 8:50, the door of the condemned cell opened. Amelia Dyer walked the short corridor unaided, though her steps were heavy. She wore the same black dress and bonnet she had worn in the dock, the skirt brushing the wet stones. The chaplain offered the usual questions. She answered in a low, steady voice, "I have nothing to say." Billington pinioned her arms with leather straps, placed the white cap over her face, adjusted the noose beneath her left ear. At exactly 9 o'clock, the lever was pulled. The drop was clean. The rope sang once, then was still. At 09:03, the prison surgeon stepped forward, felt for the pulse that was no longer there, and signed the certificate. The black flag rose above the gatehouse. Outside the walls, a larger crowd waited in the rain, silent for once. No cheers, no jeers, only the slow drip of water from umbrellas and the muffled tolling of the bell. The newspapers carried columns of horror and reluctant pity. The Pall Mall Gazette called her the greatest criminal of the age. The Times spoke of a trade in human life that had flourished unchecked for a quarter century. Questions were asked in Parliament. Within 12 months, the Infant Life Protection Act of 1897 required every person taking 2 or more children under 5 for payment to register, and every house to be open to inspection. After that, the record falls silent. Was Amelia Dyer a monster born of the river mist, or the final terrible answer to a question the age refused to ask aloud? What becomes of children no one can afford to keep? Did the rope at Newgate settle an account, or did it merely close the ledger on a debt society itself had written? And when another desperate mother stands at a stranger's door today, money trembling in her hand, does the shadow of that black bonnet still fall across the threshold? The final story of the evening is Constance Kent, a case that takes place in the bright summer sun of 1860 in a beautiful country house where every door is locked and every window is shuttered, yet a child is still missing. Constance Emily Kent was born on 06/06/1844 in the substantial villa called Road Hill House on the border between Wiltshire and Somerset, a place of clipped yews and gravel walks where the church bells of Road could be heard across the fields. She was baptised a month later, on 7/07/1844, in the little stone church at Road. Her father, Samuel Saville Kent, served as sub-inspector of factories for the Home Office, a position that brought a comfortable income and a certain standing among the county families. Her mother, Mary Ann, had borne 10 children in 15 years. 4 lay already in the churchyard when Constance arrived. The house was large, the nurseries crowded, the servants numerous, yet money was never spoken of as plentiful, only as sufficient if carefully managed. Constance, tall for her age, dark-haired and grave, shared a bedroom on the 2nd floor with her elder sister, Mary Amelia, and younger siblings. From the age of 6, she helped the nursemaid with the little ones, folding linen, carrying trays, learning early that the days were long and the nights sometimes filled with the sound of a mother coughing behind a closed door. When Mary Ann Kent died of heart failure in 1852, Constance was 8. Within a year, the former governess, Mary Drew Pratt, had taken her mother's place at the table and in her father's bed. The older children watched in silence as new half-brothers and half-sisters arrived, and the house that had once seemed spacious began to feel smaller with every cradle that appeared. The new Mrs. Kent brought order to the household, but not warmth. The elder children from the first marriage found themselves pushed to the edges of their father's attention. Constance and her sister Mary Amelia were sent away to boarding school in Bath, and then to a finishing establishment in Brighton, returning only for the holidays. At home, the nurseries rang with the voices of the younger children, Mary Amelia in 1853, Elizabeth in 1855, and finally Francis Saville on 01/06/1857. Samuel Kent doted openly on the little boy, carrying him on his shoulder through the gardens, buying him toys the older ones had never seen. Constance, now 15, watched from the schoolroom window. In the autumn of 1858, she and Mary Amelia were withdrawn from school altogether and kept at Road Hill House to assist with the younger children. Constance's duties grew heavier, dressing the little ones, mending their clothes, walking them in the park when the nursemaid was busy. She spoke little, moved quietly, and was seldom seen to smile. Letters from former school friends went unanswered. When her brother William Saville Kent left for Marlborough College in 1859, Constance remained behind, the only older child still beneath the roof. The house settled into its routine. The governess ruled the nursery, the second Mrs. Kent ruled the drawing room, and Samuel Kent came and went on factory business, always with a kiss for Francis and scarcely a glance for the tall, silent girl in the black dress who opened the door for him. The winter of 1859 to 1860 passed quietly at Road Hill House. Constance turned 16 in February. No celebration marked the day beyond a new prayer book from her father. In March, the family moved the youngest children into a larger nursery on the first floor so that Francis Saville could have the small room next to the night nursery alone. Constance helped carry the little cot herself, her arms steady, her face blank. In April, the nursemaid Elizabeth Goff complained that one of Constance's night dresses had gone missing from the laundry basket. It was never found. In May, Samuel Kent purchased a new set of razors in a Morocco case and locked them in his dressing room. Constance was seen polishing the nursery windows until they shone, though the weather was cold and the glass misted again almost at once. June arrived warm and still. On 06/05/1860, Constance cut her finger while trimming the lamp. The blood stained the tablecloth and she wrapped the wound in silence. On 06/12/1860, she asked the housemaid Sarah Cox for a length of white tape to mend a pinafore. The tape was given and never returned. The household retired early each evening, the doors were locked, the windows fastened with iron bars against the summer heat. Constance moved through the corridors like a shadow, her footsteps soft on the drugget, her candle carried low. The younger children sometimes woke to find her standing at the foot of their beds, watching them sleep, but she was gone before they could speak. On the night of 06/28/1860, the house at Road Hill fell into its usual quiet after supper. The servants retired to their attic rooms, the children to their beds. Francis Saville Kent, 3 years old, was put down in his small room next to the night nursery by Elizabeth Goff at 8 o'clock. The window was shut, the door left ajar. At 11:30, Samuel Kent and his wife went up to their chamber, locking the door behind them. Constance was last seen by the housemaid Sarah Cox at 10, sitting at the schoolroom table with a book open before her. The night passed without sound beyond the creak of the old beams and the distant hoot of an owl in the elms. At 5:30 on 06/29/1860, Elizabeth Goff woke to find Francis's bed empty. She called out, searched the nursery, then ran downstairs to rouse the house. Samuel Kent came out in his dressing gown, his face pale, his voice sharp. The servants lit candles and searched every room, every closet, every corner of the garden. At 8 o'clock, Samuel himself lifted the lid of the privy in the yard and found his youngest son lying in the shallow water, his nightdress soaked, his throat cut with a single deep wound. The razor from the dressing room case was found beside him, its blade stained. The household stood frozen in the morning light, the air heavy with the smell of damp stone and the faint tang of blood. The discovery on 06/29/1860 sent a shudder through the village and beyond. By noon, the local constable had ridden to Trowbridge for the coroner, and by evening the London papers carried the first brief accounts. Samuel Kent offered a reward of £200. On 07/02/1860, Inspector Jonathan Witcher of Scotland Yard arrived at Road Hill House with a warrant to search and question. He was a slight man in a dark coat, quiet-spoken, with eyes that missed nothing. He walked the corridors, measured windows, examined locks, and took every servant aside in turn. Elizabeth Goff repeated that the child had been in his bed at 11 and gone by 5. Sarah Cox recalled seeing Constance at 10 with a book. Witcher asked for the missing nightdress. None could be produced. On 07/05/1860, he found a blood-stained chemise hidden in the boiler hole behind the kitchen. Constance was questioned for hours in the drawing room while her stepmother wept in the next room. She answered calmly that the blood was her own monthly courses. No other stains were found on her clothing or in her room. The local magistrates committed her to Devizes jail on suspicion. Crowds gathered outside the prison gates, shouting for the murderess. On 07/27/1860, the grand jury at Devizes threw out the bill for lack of evidence. Constance walked free, pale and silent, and was driven back to Road Hill House in her father's carriage while the villagers watched from behind their curtains. The case refused to die. Letters poured into the Home Office. Witcher was recalled in disgrace, his reputation ruined. The Kent family closed the shutters and sent the remaining children away to school. Constance disappeared from view, first to a convent school in France, then to a Church of England sisterhood in Brighton. The newspapers kept the story alive for years, printing diagrams of the house, theories of secret lovers, accusations against the nursemaid, against the father himself. Road Hill House stood empty by 1864, its windows broken, its garden overgrown, a place mothers hurried their children past after dark. On the evening of 04/25/1865, Constance Kent, now 21 and living quietly at St Mary's Home in Brighton, walked alone to the Church of St Paul and asked to see the Reverend Arthur Wagner. She remained inside for more than 2 hours. When she emerged, her face was pale but composed. The following morning, 04/26/1865, she presented herself at Bow Street Police Court in London and made a full confession before Sir Thomas Henry that on the night of 06/28/1860 she had taken her half-brother Francis Saville from his bed, carried him downstairs and cut his throat with her father's razor in the privy. She said nothing more. She was removed to Devizes jail and then to Salisbury for trial. The Wiltshire Summer Assizes opened on 07/17/1865 before Mr. Justice Wills. The courtroom was crowded. Ladies in summer silks pressed against the rails. Reporters filled every bench. Constance, dressed in deep black, stood erect while the indictment was read. Her counsel, Mr. Coleridge, entered a plea of guilty at once. There would be no witnesses, no speeches, no attempt to deny. The judge asked 3 times whether she understood the consequences. Each time she answered clearly, "I do." Mr. Justice Wills placed the black cap upon his head and pronounced the sentence of death in the usual form. A murmur ran through the court. Several women fainted. That same evening, a petition for mercy, signed by more than 300 clergymen and magistrates, was sent to the Home Secretary. On 07/29/1865, Queen Victoria commuted the sentence to penal servitude for life. Constance bowed her head once and was led away without a word. Constance Kent entered Millbank Prison on 08/01/1865. For the first 9 months, she was kept in separate confinement, speaking to no one but the chaplain and the matron. In 1868, she was transferred to Woking Female Prison, then in 1871 to the new convict establishment at Fulham. She worked in silence at needlework and laundry, her hands never idle, her face never changing. In 1872, her father died. She was allowed no mourning. In 1881, she was moved to Parkhurst on the Isle of Wight. Then in 1885, after 20 years of good conduct, she was granted a conditional release on license. She sailed almost at once for Australia under the name Ruth Emily Kay, joining her brother William Saville Kent, who had become a noted marine biologist in Tasmania. For the next 40 years she lived quietly, first in a convent hospital in Queensland, then as matron of a nurses' training home in Maitland, New South Wales. She never married, never spoke of the past, never returned to England until 1933, when she came back to London to care for an elderly friend. She died on 04/19/1944 in a small private house in Willesden, aged 99 years and 10 months. The death certificate gave the cause as natural decay. The name on the register was still Ruth Emily Kay. The newspapers that had once screamed for her blood printed only a few quiet lines. Road Hill House itself was demolished in 1929. Nothing remains but a stone gatepost and a patch of nettles. After that, the record falls silent. Was Constance Kent a child driven beyond endurance by a house that had no place for her? Or did something colder and older stir in the dark corridor that night? Did the law punish the right person for the right reason? Or did it merely close a door that should have stayed open? And when another child disappears from a locked room today, do we still look first at the person who loved the victim least? And so the last ledger closes. 400 small coffins, 3 black dresses, 1 rope that fell once, and 2 lifetimes of silence that followed. Mary Ann Cotton, Amelia Dyer, Constance Kent, they walked out of the same England, carrying the same darkness in different arms. In the end, the law gave them 3 different fates, but the night gave them the same verdict, forgotten until someone opens the file again. Now the candle is almost out. Tell me, quietly, in the space below, when you look at these 3 women, do you see monsters forged in coal dust and river mist? Or do you see mirrors held up to a country that preferred its children invisible and its women obedient? Leave your thoughts beneath this video. No judgment here, only the echo of footsteps in an empty corridor. And if the silence after a story like this feels too heavy, press the bell. Stay with us. There are more doors still unopened, more names still waiting in the dark. Thank you for walking these corridors with me tonight. Until the next black veil lifts, good night.